So it would seem you have let me know who your counsel is, right? Alan Dershowitz, the Felix Frankfurter Professor of Law at Harvard Law School. He's one of the country's foremost appellate lawyers and a distinguished defender of individual liberties. His many books include the New York Times bestsellers Chutzpah and The Case for Israel. He lives in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Massachusetts. Is that your state of birth? Was Alan Dershowitz born in Massachusetts, or is he newly resided there? I request information on the birth, origin, and day and time of birth of Alan Dershowitz. Today is November 25th, 2022. I understand this book was put on clearance on November 19th, 2022. This is the first time I've seen it, however. However, the book was entered, presumably, into circulation 10/27/21. For the record, October 27th, 2021 would be approximately 10 to 15 days after I was first informed of the Stettelhouse scheme, which would be last year. It would also be, if I'm not mistaken, 36 days to 37 days after my unlawful eviction, which I understand was an act of retaliation in connection with my support of political movements that may be implicated in the case against Israel's enemies, exposing Jimmy Carter and others who stand in the way of peace. For the record, I disclose I purchased a copy of a book by Jimmy Carter. Among the other matters in the book that I have, which was regarding matters pertaining to faith and Jimmy Carter's understanding morality and his experience as the President of the United States, were two chapters, one of which discussed American policy in the Middle East, including the war in Iraq, and how that implicated matters pertaining to Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, but also matters pertaining to the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, especially considerations of apocalyptic tendencies in the United States that were exacerbating political matters and were creating a situation of misrepresentation of certain peoples of faith that interfered with the secular political process, up to and including the level of the presidency. Was this book written and put into circulation before or after the two incidences wherein former President Jimmy Carter had to receive hospital treatment for a broken hip? I will find out in a second. Okay, the copyright on this book is for 2008. If I'm correct, that would be 11 years before Jimmy Carter's first entrance into a hospital, presumably for a broken hip. I disclosed that 11 years prior to 2008, I understand that not one, but both professors in a department I had sought to study in at the University of Chicago had also broken their hips. The first one was not my teacher specifically. It was her husband, who happened to have a very noted position in that department. But the other professor was somebody who I had to talk to about re-entering the university after a period of leave of absence in order for her to assess whether or not she felt I had the capacity to resume and maintain my studies. It was my understanding that around 1997 and 1998, both of them ended up breaking their hips. A request submission is evidence, starting on page 275, chapter 46, Lily. Quote, at 7 in the morning on March 25, 2000, in a Tel Aviv hospital, Lily Sharon succumbed to lung cancer at the age of 63. She had been in and out of the hospital since January 18th and had spent much of the previous year being treated at Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York, where Sharon had often joined her, citing his absence from the Knesset as being for, quote, personal reasons, end quote. He had also sought help from doctors in Boston and Los Angeles. The media had not detailed her U.S. visits, both at Sharon's request and out of consideration for the family. Sharon and their two sons, Omri and Giyad, were with her when she died. She left two grandchildren, Rotem and Danya. She did not live to see Giyad's twin sons. Then it goes on to discuss Lily's history, including her immigration history to Israel and her parentage and other family members. For the record, I first recall seeing this book, but I have written notes I will check approximately 6 months ago. The book is called Sharon, Israel's Warrior Politician, by Anita Miller, Jordan Miller, and Sigalit Zatouni. There are a number of copies of this book on an end cap. They have been there since the time I first saw it. First ping, 18.3. The fact that intention to cause grievous bodily harm is sufficient. The fact that an intention to cause grievous bodily harm is sufficient mens rea for murder is controversial. Lord Mustill and Lord Stein have indicated that they would be willing to reconsider the law if an appropriate case was brought before the House of Lords. Lord Mustill, in Attorney General's reference number 3 of 1994, stated, quote, "The grievous harm rule is an outcropping of old law from which the surrounding strata of rationalizations have weathered away," end quote. In many ways, this is a dispute over the application of the so-called correspondence principle, which is discussed in Chapter 3. Most commentators seem to fall within one of three camps. ... It would seem there is a need for a review of Attorney General's reference number 3 of 1994. Is there actually substantial grounds in order to bring the appropriate case before the House of Lords?